the road to the unknown. The year was 1986, October 26th. In the heart of rural Brazil, nights don't just fall, they settle. They settle with a weight that smells of dry earth, roasted coffee, and the ancient silence of the caatinga. My name is a simple one, and my life back then was even simpler. I was a man of the land, a traveler of the dust, moving goods between small towns with nothing but the moonlight and my loyal donkey, Zay, to keep me company. It was roughly 7:10 p.m. I had just left the small settlement of Does, heading toward the hills. Zay was carrying a heavy load, 2 sacks of flour, 60 kilos each. 120 kilos of weight swaying rhythmically with every step. The world around us was a symphony of cicadas and the soft crunch of hooves on gravel. But then, the music stopped. Have you ever felt the silence change? It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. The air became thick, like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. Zay stopped. He didn't bray. He didn't kick. He simply froze, his ears pinned back, as if he were listening to a frequency I couldn't hear. Then came the light. At first, I thought it was a truck coming over the ridge. I told myself it was a car, because the human mind is a fragile thing. It tries to protect you with lies when the truth is too big to swallow. But cars don't float 3 feet off the ground. Cars don't glow with a cold, clinical brilliance that makes the stars look dim. It was a craft, a machine of impossible curves, silver and smooth, like a polished pearl dropped from the heavens. A door slid open. It didn't creak. It didn't bang. It made a sound like a soft sigh, a whisper of hydraulics that felt like the earth itself was exhaling in relief. And before I could pull the reins, before I could scream, I was no longer on the ground. The interior of the future. I felt a grip on my arm. It was firm, strong, but there was no malice in it. It was the grip of someone making sure you don't fall. I was being led, or perhaps, I was being claimed. As I crossed the threshold, the world of dust and donkeys vanished. Inside, the light was everywhere. It didn't come from a bulb or a lamp. The walls themselves seemed to breathe light. It was a place of impossible clarity. My eyes, used to the dim lanterns of the village, felt overwhelmed by this future. Everything was clean, white, blue, polished. And there they were. 2 of them. They were tall. Taller than any man I had ever seen in the markets of Minas. They were young, with skin that looked like it had never known a single day of hard labor under the scorching sun. Their hair was the most striking thing. It was perfectly cut, sculpted, as if every strand had been placed by a master artist. They wore clothes that looked like our own, trousers, shirts, but the fabric had a sheen, a life of its own. One of them never let go of my arm. He was the communicator. He stood close, and when he spoke, the sound didn't come just from his mouth. It was a jumble of clicks, hums, and vibrations that made my teeth ache. But as I stared into his eyes, the sounds began to shift. They began to melt into thoughts, into images. Do not be afraid. The voice echoed in the cavern of my mind. We are only traveling. We are only looking. A dialogue above the clouds. I sat on a surface that felt like a sofa, but it was softer than any cloud. I looked around at the controls. There were no steering wheels. There were buttons, hundreds of them, glowing with colors I didn't have names for. The pilot, the second man, was focused on these lights. He moved his hands with the grace of a pianist, tapping sequences that made the craft hum with a deep, subsonic power. I asked them where we were going. I asked them what they wanted with a man who carries flour on a donkey. The communicator looked at me with a strange kind of empathy. He asked if I knew where we were. I told him, I don't know, my friend. I only know we are traveling. I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt like a guest who had been invited to a party he didn't understand. We were moving. I could feel the acceleration in my gut, a pressure that made me feel light and heavy at the same time. I couldn't see out of windows at first, but I knew we were no longer on the road to the hills. We were high, higher than the birds. higher than the clouds. They were curious about me. They asked about my life, about the land, about the cargo. It was as if they were collectors of stories, and I was the latest volume in their library. The pilot didn't speak much, and when he did, his voice was harsher, more technical. But the one holding my arm, he was kind. He was the bridge between my world of dirt and his world of stars. The return and the frozen time. Time in that place is not like time on Earth. Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like the blink of an eye. I watched them work. I watched the way they interacted with their machine, as if it were a living thing, an extension of their own bodies. Eventually, the hum changed. The pressure in my stomach returned. I felt the craft descending. The communicator looked at me one last time. He didn't say goodbye. He simply projected a sense of completion. The mission, the observation, it was done. The door hissed open once more. The cool, night air of Brazil rushed in, smelling of charcoal and damp grass. I stepped out onto the pavement near the town. I felt dizzy, disoriented. I checked the sky. The moon had moved. The stars had shifted. I walked back to the trail where it had all started. I expected Zay to be miles away. I expected the flower to be stolen, the donkey gone. But as I reached the clearing, my heart nearly stopped. There he was, Zay, standing in the exact same spot. The 120 kilos of flour were still balanced on his back. He hadn't moved an inch. He hadn't even eaten the grass at his feet. It was 4 a.m. I had been gone for nearly 9 hours. But for my donkey, and for the cargo, not a single second had. It was as if they had been carved out of time itself. I walked home in the pre-dawn light, the sound of Zay's hooves finally returning to the gravel.
What is it?
When I reached my house, my wife was crying. She was frantic.
Something in the desert.
She didn't believe me at first.
Natural.
Who would? A man goes out for flour and comes back with the secrets of the stars. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel that hand on my arm. I can still see the perfect hair of the starmen. And I know that while we are down here, tilling the soil and carrying our loads, they are up there, watching, traveling, and waiting for the next rider in the night. Underscore 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 underscore. The unforeseen journey, an encounter beyond our world. The night of October 26, 1986, was meant to be like countless others. The routine of a countryman, a flower drover, was marked by the rhythmic cadence of Zay's hooves and the profound silence of the caatinga. I had left the small settlement of Does around 7:10 p.m., heading towards the hills, carrying 2 sacks of flour, 60 kilos each, a total of 120 kilos. It was a heavy load, but Zay, my faithful companion, was accustomed to it. The symphony of cicadas and the crunch of gravel under his hooves were the soundtrack of my life.
Zay, look.
But on that particular night, the melody shattered.
What is that?
The silence that followed was not the usual quiet of the night. It was a dense, almost palpable silence, as if the air itself had been sucked away, leaving a heavy vacuum. Zay, who never faltered in his steady pace, stopped abruptly.
What is it?
His ears,
Stop.
usually alert to the
hear?
sound of the bush, were now flattened, motionless, as if he were tuned into a frequency my human ears could not perceive. He didn't bray, he didn't kick. He simply froze, a statue of flesh and bone in the midst of the deepening darkness. Then the light. In the first instant, my mind, desperately seeking familiar explanations, tried to convince me it was a truck, a car coming down the road. But the truth, no matter how much I tried to disguise it, was undeniable. Cars don't float 3 feet off the ground. Cars don't emit a cold, intense glow that eclipses the stars. It was a craft, a machine of impossible curves, silver and smooth, like a polished pearl that had fallen from the sky. The descriptions I had seen in photos on Andrei Polenho's channel, of an event he experienced, were now materializing before my very eyes. A door slid open, without the slightest creak of hinges or the clang of metal. Just a soft hiss, a hydraulic whisper that seemed like the very breath of the earth. Before I could react, pull Zay's reins, or scream, I was lifted from the ground. The threshold of another realm. I felt a firm grip on my arm. It wasn't a violent grip, but resolute, like someone ensuring you wouldn't fall. I was being led, or perhaps, claimed by an unknown force. As I crossed the threshold of that craft, the world of dust and donkeys completely vanished. The interior was bathed in light. There were no visible lamps. The walls themselves seemed to emit their own glow, a luminosity that permeated everything. It was a place of absolute clarity, where my eyes, accustomed to the dimness of lanterns and the faint glow of the moon, felt overwhelmed. Everything was impeccably clean, in shades of white and blue, with polished surfaces that reflected the light softly. And there they were. Two beings. They were tall, taller than any man I had ever seen in the markets of Minas Gerais. They appeared young, with skin that radiated a vitality that had never known the scorching sun or hard labor. What struck me most was their hair, perfectly cut, sculpted, as if each strand had been meticulously placed by an artist. Their clothes, though similar to ours, trousers and shirts, possessed a subtle sheen, a texture that seemed to have a life of its own.
We need your help.
One of them, the communicator, never let go of my arm. He remained close, and when he spoke, the sound didn't just come from his mouth. It was a mixture of clicks, hums, and vibrations that resonated in my teeth. But as I looked into his eyes, those sounds began to transform, to merge into thoughts, into clear images in my mind. Do not be afraid. The voice echoed in the cavern of my mind.
I understand.
We are only traveling. We are only observing. The silent voyage. I was guided to a surface that felt like a sofa, yet was softer than any cloud I had ever imagined. Around me, the craft's controls glowed. There were no steering wheels, only hundreds of buttons, each with a color I had never seen before. The pilot, the second being, was absorbed in these lights, moving his hands with the grace of a pianist, tapping sequences that made the craft hum with a deep, subsonic power. My mind was in a whirlwind. I asked where we were going, what they wanted with a man who carried flour on a donkey. The communicator looked at me with a strange empathy. He asked if I knew where we were. I don't know, my friend, I replied. I only know we are traveling. I didn't feel like a prisoner, but an unexpected guest at a party I couldn't comprehend. The craft was in motion. I felt the acceleration in my stomach, a pressure that made me feel both light and heavy at the same time. At first, I couldn't see anything through the windows, but I knew we were no longer on the road to the hills. We were high, higher than the birds, higher than the clouds.
Where do you come from?
They seemed curious about me. They asked about my life, about the land, about the cargo. It was as if they were collectors of stories, and I was the latest volume in their vast library. The pilot spoke little, and when he did, his voice was harsher, more technical. But the communicator, the one holding my arm, was kind. He was the bridge between my world of dirt and their world of stars. The conversation continued, and he kept asking me questions. I believe it was a way to distract me, to keep me calm. He asked if I knew where we were, and I repeated that I didn't. I was overwhelmed. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't even jump out to die quickly, to avoid 70 years of suicide, because I was secure, held fast. The sound was a normal hum, like that of a car, but what was piloting was the faith in the devices, in the buttons. When it accelerated, I felt the impact, that sensation of going higher. The secret base and the remote control. At a certain point, I felt the craft decelerate, as if braking, and then landing. Descending. I couldn't see anything outside. It was like being inside a box. The communicator continued to ask me questions, a direct conversation, perhaps to keep me distracted. When the craft stopped, he manipulated something I had never seen in my life. We landed in a place that looked like a city, well cemented, well maintained. Like a base. When the door opened,
Where are you from?
the pilot exited
Where am
on
I?
one side,
What's going on?
and the
Tell
communicator,
me your
still
story.
holding my
Tell
arm,
me,
came
what
out
is
with
this
me.
place?
He took out a remote
Initiating
control,
secondary
something utterly new to me.
Energy
In front of us,
phenomenal.
there was a hall, a very beautiful
Unlocking.
place, with a
Never
very
thought I'd be in a
vibrant
place
green
like
color,
this.
very well painted. It was a kind of
quickly,
building.
or you'll
He
be
touched
left
the
behind.
remote control to a wall, and the wall connected. A gate opened and retracted inwards. It was a grand
Look at
opening,
this.
a gate that slid into the building, into that apparatus. The interior
Welcome,
of the
we've been
building was
expecting
very
you.
well painted,
Who are you
with
people?
low sofas
Just
and
relax,
abundant
we can
light,
help you.
very bright. It was a place where, before entering, you couldn't see anything from the outside. The return and the mystery of time. Time in that place did not behave as it does on Earth. Minutes felt like hours, and hours passed in the blink of an eye. I watched them work, the way they interacted with the machine, as if it were an extension of their own bodies. Eventually, the hum of the craft changed. The pressure in my stomach returned, and I felt the craft descending. The communicator looked at me one last time, without saying goodbye, but conveying a sense of completion. The mission, the observation, was done. The door hissed open once more. The cool, fresh night air of Brazil rushed in, bringing with it the smell of charcoal and damp grass. I stepped out onto the pavement near the town, feeling dizzy and disoriented. I looked up at the sky. The moon had moved, the stars had shifted their positions. I walked back to the trail where it had all begun. I expected to find Zay miles away, the flower stolen, the donkey gone. But as I reached the clearing, my heart almost stopped. There he was, Zay, standing in the exact same spot. The 120 kilos of flour were still balanced on his back. He hadn't moved an inch, nor had he even eaten the grass at his feet. It was 4 a.m. I had been gone for nearly 9 hours. But for my donkey and for the cargo, not a single second had passed. It was as if they had been frozen in time. I walked home in the pre-dawn light, the sound of Zay's hooves finally returning to the gravel. When I arrived, my wife was crying, frantic. She didn't believe me at first. Who would? A man leaves to fetch flour and returns with the secrets of the stars. She and the small children were terribly worried, as nothing like this had ever happened. I arrived around 4 a.m., which makes me believe they left me around 3 a.m. They picked me up around 7:10, 7:15 p.m., and dropped me off around 3 a.m. My wife was crying in agony, not knowing where I was, worried because I had to buy that flour. I first had to unload the donkey, take off the flour, before I could even enter the house. The donkey was in the same spot with the load, by the miracle of God. I hadn't brought the two 120 kilo sacks, only 60 kilos to get through the night. The young man who looked after the property, Ivan, who at the time belonged to Geronimoseed, had already gone to check on some cows and saw the donkey's footprints there. He became worried because he hadn't seen me or the donkey. When he arrived there, I had already come home. He saw the footprints and the dumb, and was terribly worried, not knowing what had happened to me. He said, "Say Toto ran away." Say Toto was the one who passed by on the road. He only calmed down when he heard news of me the next day. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel that hand on my arm. I can still see the perfect hair of the starmen. And I know that while we are down here, tilling the soil and carrying our loads, they are up there, watching, traveling, and waiting for the next rider in the night.